Has anyone here seen the Netflix show Carol and the End of the World? No? I guess I'm the only one? Okay. One other person. All right. Okay. Well, so then this won't be familiar. But in this animated show, the world is coming to an end. In 6 months, exactly. The countdown on the timer has been set because a meteor is headed towards Earth. So most people in the show adopt a you only live once attitude. There are bonfires in the middle of the street with people partying and drinking. Others pursue spiritual approaches, and parks are filled with chanting yogis and silent meditators. But none of that appeals to Carol. Instead, Carol, the title character, feels adrift because her work has come to an end. She is listless, and has no idea what to do with her time. But one day, to her delight, she discovers that an accounting firm is still operating. The firm is wholly dedicated to discovering the reason for a $1.46 discrepancy on its books. And so Carol begins working for them in an attempt to accomplish that mission of discovering what the reason for that discrepancy is before the world ends. The offbeat humor suggests some serious existential questions. These are questions about our time here on Earth and what gives that time meaning. Some in the show are choosing to eat, drink, and be merry. They are prioritizing the pleasures of life. Others are choosing a spiritual approach to answering these questions. And then there are folks like Carol who choose to work as an avenue to find meaning. It is not only a way to earn a living, but instead anchors identity and purpose. Actually, Carol and the End of the World might be more on the nose than we first expect, based on its sort of ludicrous premise. A recent survey by Forbes said that 70% of people find meaning and purpose solely through work. Not partly, but solely through work. This is further supported by surveys of people who face unemployment. It is not only financial insecurity and worry that plagues the unemployed, but rather many report feeling a sense of purposelessness that afflicts them. With the prevalence of people finding meaning in work, we might think that this is how it's always been. We might think that human beings have always found transcendent purpose through labor, but this is not the case. In fact, it's a rather recent historical development. Sarah Jaffe wrote the book, Work Won't Love You Back: How Devotion to Our Jobs Keeps Us Exploited, Exhausted, and Alone. And in that book, she asks the question, when did people start framing work in terms of doing what you love? When did we start thinking about our jobs as something that we need to love? The author argues that this only came within the last half century or so. Before that, work was understood as a transaction. One gave away their labor so that they could have leisure time. And it was in that time away from work, in that leisure time, that people would pursue the things that truly gave them meaning, the things that they truly love. For example, one might volunteer or spend time with family or engage in a hobby, all of which gave them a sense of meaning and purpose. Work was a necessary evil in order to accomplish those goals. Work wasn't pleasure. It wasn't something that you loved. Rather, work was toil. But that changed. It changed in the 1970s and 1980s. And that is when this new idea came to the forefront of public life, the idea that you have to do what you love, find what you love, and do what you love. Meaning and purpose became tied to work. And while that sounds like a positive development, that we can now find purpose and meaning in our professions, it has also had negative impacts and influences. For example, on evenings and weekends, shouldn't you be glad to answer emails and take phone calls? And shouldn't you be honored to take that unpaid internship? Actually, our internship is not unpaid, so I exempt us from that. But shouldn't you be happy to give away free labor in order to gain exposure for your business that you care so much about? And isn't all of that a small price to pay not to have hobbies and not to have time with your family or friends because you are doing what you love? There is an irony in all of this. While people say that they are finding meaning in their work in record numbers, at the same time, burnout and career change are at record highs. Another recent survey suggests that 77% of people report feeling burnout at some point in their career. Jeffrey says that perhaps the problem is not that we don't love our work, but maybe it's that we love it too much. And that is no small self-deception, because work is still work, and too much of it is not a good thing. I'm thinking today about the parable of the vineyard. And you might remember the basic outline of this one. Perhaps you heard it in Sunday school when you were growing up. I'm going to tell it, but I'm going to tell it a little bit different. I'm going to tell it in a way that I think gets at the meaning I'm trying to communicate with this sermon. The kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire workers for the vineyard. He agreed to pay them a denarius for the day and then sent them to do work in his vineyard. And then about 9 in the morning, he went out and saw others standing in the marketplace doing nothing. He told them, "You also go out and do work in the vineyard, and I will pay you whatever is right." And so they went. He went out again about noon and about 3 in the afternoon, and he did the same thing. And then about 5 in the afternoon, he went out and found still others standing around in the marketplace. He asked them, "Why have you been standing here all day long doing nothing?" "Because no one has hired us," they said. He then said to them, "You also go and work in my vineyard." And then when evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to his foreman, "Call the workers and then pay them their wages, beginning with the first ones hired and then going to the last ones hired." And the workers who were hired first and that had worked the longest from sunup all the way to sundown, they received a denarius. But then those came who were hired last, and they were angered. When they received the denarius, they began to grumble at the landowner. "It is not fair that we did not get to work as long as these others. We should at least be able to work into the night and then through the weekend before we receive a denarius. How else are we to find meaning in our lives?" It's a rewrite that hits a little too close to home for me. I am someone who finds a lot of meaning in the work that he does. I count myself lucky every day that I'm able to serve as your minister. It is deeply rooted in the joy that I find in this work and the meaning that I find in it. But it has also caused me periods where I have not slept or ate, and weeks where I have gone without attention to family and loved ones. And I don't at all say that because I think my work is unique, that there's something about this work that is particularly challenging. Instead, I say it precisely because I think it isn't unique. I can imagine many of us have pushed ourselves too hard at times. And it makes sense. It's glorified in our culture. 80-hour work weeks. Don't ever take a vacation. Work through the weekend. It's all done in the name of doing what you love. But in those moments, I can't help but wonder if the idea of our happiness, the happiness that we find in doing what we love, doesn't in fact become an obstacle to our being happy. Now, lots of us here have different relationships to our work. Some of us love it, others do not. Some overwork, and some find it easier to step away from the role. Others don't work or are no longer working. My message today is not that any one of those options is the right one. Instead, I think that wherever we are in relationship to our work, we can consider balance. Whether we love our work or not, the question might be, can we take time to rest? Can we take time to reconnect with our loved ones? Can we find new and different ways of reclaiming joy and purpose in our lives? That can take effort and discipline, but it is also necessary and important for our spirits. I'd like to close today with a poem called Balance by Jean Leary. My life is all about my poems, my music, and most of all, my glass cities. They steal my attention, they consume my interest, they envelop me. Do they perhaps exhaust me too? When I succeed in shifting to the garden, to the woods, to the ocean, how refreshed I feel in an altogether different way. By osmosis, joy seeps in through my pores, through my lungs, through my feet. My brain feels less busy. It has a chance to rest. An earlier way of being emerges, and I am cradled. In this hour and beyond, may joy seep into your life. May we find work and rest, purpose and hope. And may we know that whatever we do for work, we are cradled by love. Happy Labor Day.